Hi, I'm Philip Connaughton. I'm a choreographer, dance artist, originally from Ballymun. I live in Harold's Cross now, and yeah.
Cool. Thanks for doing this, Philip. Great to chat to you. Come here to me. Speaking of growing up in Ballymun, was like when did you start, leaning towards dance? When was that kind of like was there a performative element always in you, do you think?
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. I I think I always wanted to dance. I mean, these stories are so anecdotal, but they're true. And I think when I was a kid, to to get me into my pajamas, my mum and dad used to sing The Stripper, da dan 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 boom boom, da dan 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 boom boom. And so I would strip all my clothes off, which ironically I've ended up doing in a lot of my work. So it's carried through. And then when I was kind of with just in my nappy, they'd kind of get my pajamas in and stick me in bed. And so
Ever.
I think in my family there was a whole performative aspect. We liked to sing, we liked to dance, they enjoyed that and they pushed that and promoted that. And so I think by the time I was 4 or 5, I was dancing around and I said to my mom, look, I want to dance. And she sent me to classes. I think I wanted to play the violin, and they sent me to tap dancing classes as well. So I wanted to do everything. You know the way kids want to do everything. But actually, so they sent me to tap dancing classes, and the tap dancing stuck. I really enjoyed it.
I love that. Very clever parents. You want to play the violin, now you're grand. You're going to tap dancing instead.
And I didn't get real tap shoes for like a year, just in case I wasn't. I was tap dancing in these pumps. You'd get, there were these black pumps at the time that had a black kind of band at the front. Like, I don't know how the hell I would have been able to dance in those. And then I got some tap shoes, and it was just, well, that was it. I was a professional then, you got your tap shoes.
And was this like, obviously that was kind of through primary school, was that kind of nurtured in school? Was there kind of, was there an opportunity in school at all to kind of dance or anything like that?
Yeah, there was. It was always a really healthy environment for me, I think. And I think maybe I was just lucky through primary school. And even into secondary school, there was an understanding that that's what I did.
Okay.
I don't know how that happened or why that happened. Maybe I was just very lucky with the people that were around me. But for example, when I went to secondary school in St. Aidan's, I went to St. Aidan's because my family, before they moved to Ballymun, they lived in Whitehall. So my eldest brothers had gone to St. Aidan's, so we followed through, on Collins Avenue. And my career guidance teacher, I had said to him that I wanted to be a dancer. And at the time I kind of moved into classical dance, and I had this French teacher, Veronique Belliot, and she'd already organized auditions for me, and and I was going to go to the UK, and I got a scholarship to Rambert and to Ballet Rambert, and he had done his own studies and had come back to me with Rambert as well, and presented me with all these papers going, if you want a career in dance, I think this is the right school for you. So it was just amazing that the school I went to came from two different people. And I actually had a career, because, so many people, there's so many bad stories about career guidance teachers, but actually this guy went to a lot of trouble to actually consider what I needed, which I just thought was amazing.
And Philip, I mean, that's a jump from, say, your tap from starting tap into getting into more classical dance. Was there a moment when that started to happen, or was there a moment that you and your family kind of went, oh Jesus, this is like, serious?
Yeah, there was. Well, it was gradual in the sense that, it started with tap dancing on Granby Row, I think, in one of those old buildings that then became the Wax Museum, that then became a Maldron Hotel.
Yeah.
In the basement of one of these buildings. And then it kind of went, I jumped to somewhere that had tap dancing and jazz classes. And then from jazz, it kind of, it worked its way to classical ballet. And then I was really into classical ballet because there was something, it's really weird because it's quite boring for a young person, I think generally classical ballet, because you don't really fully get to dance properly until it's all there, until all the bits are in working properly. And that takes a long time. So it's kind of weird that I had a particular interest in the technicalities of the body at such an early age. And but it kind of gradually worked up to that. And then I had this young French lady who kind of took an interest in me. She was my teacher, and she kind of started giving me private lessons for free. She dropped me home to Ballymun. I was kind of really well protected by some people who were interested in my career, which was so nice. And she's moved back to France since, and I work a lot in France now. And she has a big school in La Provence. And she's come to see my shows and everything. So it's been a real full circle thing, you know?
Wow. And then for your, I suppose it would have been a big realization then in your family that this was something that was going to be your life. Was that kind of very early on? That, I mean, obviously, when you're 4 or 5 saying you want to be a dancer, there's obviously decisions being made there very early by you.
Yeah, it's weird because, my dad's not around now, and my mom is she's not in a state where she could answer those questions, but it's kind of strange because I guess I was the 5th kid. And so by the time they get to number 5, they're so much more relaxed about everything. I think had my eldest brother said to them, I want to be a dancer, or I want to go away and train as a dancer, it would have been an absolute no. But by the time they got to me, they were kind of much more philosophical and seasoned in possibilities and things like that. So I was really very lucky in that sense that I guess, and I don't even fully know what the response was. I guess they must have been worried about it, but they must have spoken to people. But they let me do it.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of crazy. Like when I think of it now, I was 15 going off to London.
15?
At 15, yeah. I was doing my schooling over there as well. So I was doing my A-levels and things. And, but when I think of it now, when I look at some 15-year-olds, like my friend's kid just turned 16 the other day, and I'd have a holy heart attack if I thought he was going over to London by himself. Yeah.
But there was obviously something in you from a very early age that was that driven into, into this your destiny.
I never questioned it. I was absolutely living the life. It was great.
And what was that experience like for you, Philip? That kind of 15-year-old from Ballymun arriving into the big metropolis of London. Was there a kind of culture shock for you, or was it something you just took in your stride?
It was massive. It was just so huge, the culture shock. And Ireland was so different then. That was what, 1990 or something like that. So just 90. No, was it 1990? No, what am I saying? Yeah, no, 1989. About 1989. So it was such a different place, and there was still that kind of really crazy post-colonial thing, and that existed here, which doesn't happen as much now. I think hopefully we've moved on from that, but and the IRA and this whole kind of guilt and not as good as, and all of these feelings that even as a 15-year-old I was so aware of. Yeah. I felt kind of so many things, and moving there. Yeah, it was really, really strange. My parents, I had money from the Arts Council at the time. There were bursaries, and I had a scholarship from Rambert, but then there was kind of bursaries so that you could, for accommodation and things like that. I don't think they exist anymore, which is really crazy. And I'm not sure how that works now, but I know that the Arts Council don't do those things, and I think maybe Dublin City Council does it. I actually don't know, but it would have been impossible without this funding. You know what I mean? Without this support, and it covered my accommodation, which kind of gave me 2 meals a day and a bed, living with a family. So, but my mom used to send me, my mom and dad used to send me £10 a week, right? and my bus pass was £7. So I had £3 spending money. I was fucking starving the whole time. I was starving because the English portions were really tiny. I just remember the whole time being absolutely starving. But anyway, I survived, so it was grand. And they used to send me over packets of biscuits and things like that. But I was actually very happy. I was, dancing 8 hours a day.
And how long were you there for?
I was there for 3 years. So 3 years, and then after that, I started working straight away. Mm-hmm.
In the UK?
Yeah, I worked in the UK for a couple of years in London. I kind of went straight into music because I always wanted to do musicals. So I had this kind of contemporary and classical training, but the tap dancing and also the way what my family and what my parents had nurtured was Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, Gene Kelly, Singing in the Rain, Donald O'Connor. It was all of this stuff, and that it still is very much a part of what I do, and it still is very much what makes me kind of get excited. And so when my training finished, I remember there were auditions for Oklahoma. They were doing like a UK tour, and it was this very famous American choreographer, contemporary dance choreographer called Lar Lubavitch, and I ended up working with him, and it was such an incredible opportunity actually. And then I did some stuff in the West End, some shows in the West End, and then got that out of my system, and then started getting more into contemporary dance again.
Okay.
But I've always jumped in and out of those.
And but did you come home? Did you come home to Ireland directly after that, or was there more traveling involved?
No, I didn't come back to Ireland for ages. While I was in London, then I started working in Munich, and I worked in Munich for a little while, and then I went to Barcelona, and I lived in Barcelona for 14 years. Okay. So and then over my 14 years in Barcelona, I would have had a foot in Dublin. So I would have danced, come back every now and then and done a project in Dublin with Irish Modern Dance Theatre at the time, John Scott, and then later on with Liz Roach. And then I suppose coming towards the end of my time in Barcelona, I ended up coming back to Dublin to do a thing at the Abbey, this is Pop Baby Alice in Funderland. Yeah. With a contract in the Abbey, you couldn't leave the country. Yeah. On the contract. So I'd never been such a long period of time in Dublin, and I actually suddenly thought, oh, Jesus, I love it here. And I also became aware that that I had been expelling a lot of creative energy. This is an interesting thing for me, that I've been expelling a lot of creative energy just being in a different place.
Okay.
So, just trying to fully make myself understood in a foreign country. There's a lot of energy. And like, I speak Catalan and I speak Spanish. And I was a long time there, so I would speak both of those languages very well. And but even then, there's that extra push of energy that means that you always have to go that little bit extra to make things understood. Whereas when I came back to Ireland over the years, I was aware that I had a common backlog of referencing that was similar to everyone else. I don't know if that makes sense. And there was something really pleasing in that I could, mention a Battenberg and everyone instantly knew what I was on about. And so, but also in my physical body, that there are things that I could do, that there were nuances to the way that I would move that people here were more open to.
Okay. And so just take me back then in relation to, say, the Barcelona years or that kind of time in your life. Was choreography or developing your own work in your DNA then? Was that kind of
No, it didn't happen till I was in Dublin, and I was always very much interested in performing, and so I danced in different companies, and for me, it was always really important that choreography came from an honest place, like a place where I really wanted to make something, I really wanted to express something, and so it didn't happen until much, much later, when I came back to Dublin. And I actually, it kind of, it happened with the loss of it happened with the loss of my father. It happened with the loss of my aunt, who was like my second mother. And so with these two people, there was something very existential about that. And also I was probably coming into my 30s at that stage. So with that, it made me kind of shift into something different, and that I had to express myself in a different way, and that there was suddenly a time frame to getting things done. So it became all about learning and expressing, and then I needed to take control more about what I was doing. Also, as a dancer, for me, doing somebody else's material was absolutely fantastic, but there comes a time when you need to express yourself in your own way, because you're not getting to do that if you're doing somebody else's work.
Yeah.
There might be a move that your body needs to do that you're not getting to do. It's weird.
And it seems to have interestingly matched around the same time when you say yourself that there's a kind of nearly a genetic kind of physical match with, say, your Irish, dancing scene, and your kind of the physicality that's kind of there more naturally to in other countries, which may have had an effect as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it did. There was just it was just like I could click into something, or lock into something, and maybe that energy that I was spending in I'll tell you what it is. So when I was living in Barcelona, and it's a fascinating thing, and I've got it a bit myself through osmosis by just being there. I was at one stage, so I was dancing in a contemporary dance company, but it was a new company, the funding was really bad, so I had another show at the weekends, a show called That's Jazz. And I had a tap dancing solo in this show at the weekends, and it was a brand new theatre. It was amazing, amazing space, and we used to have these huge audiences would come in, and so it was kind of a variety show, and there was a flamenco dancer that was on after me. And so I would come out and I would do this tap solo, and the audience would sit there and they'd kind of go, and then the flamenco dancer would come out and he'd do kind of the same type of footwork, but he'd come out and he'd go, yeah, 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 and they'd go, oh my God, ah! And there was something that they needed that to emote them, to get a response from them. And with the type of contemporary dance that the way my body, so that was an example with footwork, with tap dancing, but with contemporary dance, the way that my body wanted to move versus the way they like to see contemporary dance, there was also a cultural difference. And I felt that maybe in Ireland we didn't need that. We didn't need that. We could deal with something a little softer.
Okay.
Now that's a terrible generalization, but there's something in that really I didn't have to explain or apologize for myself as much.
Yeah. And do you feel that then, was there a nervousness behind then you showing yourself in that way with your own work? Was that kind of...
In Barcelona?
No, in Ireland.
No, because also when I started showing myself, it was around that time, which was a period of loss, and it was also very much caught up in I don't give a fuck anymore, and also when you get a bit older, you stop worrying about what other people think.
Yeah.
And that really started to happen. So that was freeing.
And did you feel then like, you know, a duck to water when you started kind of, you know, making work and working with other people to make work? And also then, I suppose, working across genres as well, like, you know, kind of into theatre, you know, was there a whole different vista then opened up for you?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the great things about working in a smaller environment like Ireland, in a in a scene, in a theatrical scene like Ireland, is that in order to survive, you have to do lots of things. So, for example, I have friends in other bigger cities that they are contemporary dance choreographers, or they choreograph for opera, or they choreograph for theatre, and some of them obviously overlap, but generally each area has its thing, you know. Whereas here, to survive, you have to do a bit of everything, and so that was very exciting to be able to start to discover these other worlds. But with the choreography, what the nicest thing about it was that I started. I really wanted to do it, that I really liked it, and it did come from this natural place. And for me, still, it's a learning process. So when I take on a concept, particularly in my own work, so less working for theatre and opera, because that's something very specific. You're working with a script, or you're working, you know, with a particular opera or something like that. But when I'm making my own work, I take out an idea that's in my head, and then I have to pull it apart and pull it apart. So it's like writing a play, I suppose. But I have to make the whole thing, and it's a huge learning process for me. And so I discover all sorts of things. So, you know, with each piece I've made, it's helped me grow just selfishly, just for myself. It's helped me figure out all sorts of things about how I work and how I see the world and how the world is, maybe, as well.
Will you talk a bit more about that process, about how you go about developing something? I'm very interested in that from that physical space. Like, is it something like from how does that thought transfer to movement, or does it work on the floor, or is it different for every piece?
Yeah. Oh, it's hard to say. I have to think a little bit about it. Sometimes what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? So sometimes I have things that are recurring, like thoughts that are recurring that just keep coming back and keep coming into my head. And over the years, like, it's not over weeks or something, it's over the years, something will come back, and then you're like, oh yeah, I remember that, or come back, or something will occur to me, and I kind of put it aside. But I notice when they keep coming back that it's something that I maybe have to develop a little bit more. And once you start looking at it and thinking about it, it's like opening a can of worms, and then suddenly everything you look at becomes a question in relation to this thought that I have. So, and then I suppose I start building from there. And I don't know when it shifts from physical, like from mental into physical, or, you know, at what point that happens. It's normally, I would say, like, there's normally some sort of physical aspect to it. Like, I guess I'm not being terribly clear, but
Oh, you are actually.
But I'm not quite sure when.
Yeah.
But, like, for example, I think one of the things that that spans my work is, and actually the first piece I made was more successful. The first kind of proper piece, I'd made a short piece in New York called Embody. And it was just like a 15-minute little thing, and it was really nice. I liked it because that was a big step for me. And then I made at Axis, was Mortis as Philippus, when I was dance artist in residence there. And what was I going to say about it? What was I going to say about Mortis as Philippus? Well, I don't know. I don't know what I was going to say there.
Maybe I'll ask you something, and maybe I might come back to you, because I was going to bring up the red residency here. Because what was fascinating for me and what you approached us with was the idea of you making this piece, that would end up in the dance festival, but also you making a piece with alongside, say, dancers from different genres, young dancers from different genres in Ballymun. And it was fascinating. Actually, just looking back on, RTE came out and did a 2 or 3 minute
I
piece.
saw that.
But it was incredible that, you know, like Brennan the Gallet, and we got a Galley, and kind of lots of other kind of people came out, and to see those young people who would have been very, like you were speaking about earlier on in the interview, very, very closeted in their hip hop or in their Irish dance, being put into a room in the complete opposite, and coming out sweating, and realizing that the techniques were different, but the actual end game was the same. That was very, very enervating time around this building.
Yeah, it was so exciting, and it was so exciting for me to see all of that talent that existed. Actually, I always remember, you know, so when I was going to meet the different groups, or the different, so there was hip hop and Irish dancing, and, you know, there was kind of a lot of different groups, lots of Irish dance, lots of hip hop. I seem to remember it was one classical, I think, and yeah. Anyway, but I remember going to see the hip hop group, and they were so nice, and I actually, a lot of those girls, they stayed right till the end. And I'm still in touch with some of them, and they're absolutely fantastic. And but I remember them kind of, I came along and they were like, you know, could you choreograph something on us? And I kind of choreographed something, and they did it really, really well. And they were like, now would you like us to show you what we do? And I said, sure, yeah, show me there. And then they did this thing, which was absolutely fantastic. And it was like, I felt so stupid. I was like, what can I show you guys? You're so brilliant. Like, I was so impressed with the talent, and the same with all of the groups. And it was just so refreshing. But it was really great for them. Yeah, there was a real, a bunch of people across the board. So as you said, Brendan de Gallet, I think they had Liz Rhodes, they had Kyle Abraham from New York, who's like this big Alvin Ailey, huge, you know, has worked with Beyonce, you know what I mean? So they had all of these kind of different people working with them, and I think it was great to see them excited about this, and excited about the possibilities.
And yet within that kind of, you developed this absolutely extraordinarily beautiful piece, which was just mind-blowing. I just kind of, you know, yeah, it was just so beautiful. And so kind of, I think there's a certain aesthetic that, whereas your dance pieces are very different, but I think there's a certain Philip Connaughton aesthetic that, you know, is very interesting and intriguing, actually. Well,
what was really nice about it, and I suppose this goes back to what I'd forgotten I was to say about this kind of this overarching theme, that there's something in making work for me, which I had to kind of constantly tell myself, was to be honest and to be open and to kind of bare my soul as much as I possibly could. And if I was, you know, to not be afraid to be vulnerable. And there was something about all of those young kids, young dancers, that they were so open and so vulnerable, and in a healthy way, in a safe way. They allowed themselves to be seen by all of these people, and I think that they made the piece. I mean, that's why it was so beautiful, because they took that on and they learned something, and they wanted to go on that journey with me, which was really great, you know.
And I think that word is, because I think it strikes a chord across, for me, across all the art forms, that sense of the power within vulnerability. And I think particularly within dance, I mean, it seems that the audience is very important to you, you know, back from that kind of tap dancing flamenco interaction in Spain. But that, you know, that liveness is kind of hugely important. And I suppose that that end piece of that performative nature of dance, particularly contemporary dance, is a very delicate balance between the viewer and the performer. You know, because it's not necessarily figurative or narrative driven. Do you know what I mean? It's that we're all in this space together. And is that something that you're very aware of when you're actually on stage?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I think about a lot when I'm making the work, because it's important to me. It's important to me so that dance is different. It's different, as you said, and it's non-narrative, and people, there's so much information in the body, and people can often forget, not forget, they get nervous about it because they don't know where to hold on, or they don't know, you know, what to feel. And it's not a passive process. It requires them to go with their thoughts. It requires the audience, I mean, to interact with what they're seeing and come up with their own solutions a lot, their own understanding of it a lot of the time. And quite often we're not used to doing that. And where it goes wrong is that people start to doubt themselves. And you know, I always use my mother as an example. I think when I eventually came back to Ireland and started doing contemporary dance, they'd sent off a tap dancer. Well, I'd done ballet, but they were, you know, they'd sent off a tap dancer, and I was doing a piece in the basement of the RHA gallery, and my mum came to see it, and they were walking around the space, and already she thought that was weird, you know. They were walking like, where are the seats? Why am I not, where's my seat? And I think I came out and I had to kick over this chandelier and like make a mess, and I had these boots on and I was kind of going crazy. And my mum turned around to this lady and she just said, he's very bold. And she totally was kind of, didn't get what was going on here, like didn't get the process. But just through exposure and coming to see things, like 20 years later, she had such a great understanding of her own opinion, yeah, and confidence in her own opinion, to like something or not like it, based on how it affected her. And so I suppose that takes time. So I like to, when I'm making work, to take that into consideration and to not alienate, to try and give it layers so that it can help somebody who's feeling a bit alienated, but also then the rest of it, you know.
Yeah.
So just levels. Yeah. And I think that one of the ways I have in my later work, one of the ways that I've been doing that more is through humor, because if I found that if I can get the audience on board with me by making them laugh a little, then I can attack them with the truth, and they soften and trust you. And once they trust you, you can hit them with the real stuff. That's nice, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's certainly like the last piece, and it was in the Fringe the last year, the year before.
That was the second last one, assisted solo.
Yeah, second last. Sorry, Philip. Yes. And that, I suppose, that kind of brings me into a space where you mentioned humor there, but also you're very aware in your work of theatrical devices. So, like obviously non-necessarily known dance, but like theater devices that work within plays. And does that come from kind of the experience of choreographing or being movement director on pieces of work? Because that really has that role has kind of ballooned in the last decade, let's say. An awful lot of opportunities for choreographers to work in theatre and opera and musicals has kind of really grown. Is that a massive effect on your own work, or is that something separate completely?
I don't know. Well, I suppose yes, there's a theatricality to my work. When I'm enjoying it at its most, there's a theatricality to it. Because, and I think that comes from the musical theatre side of things. So, and then obviously working in theatre, I've learned a lot from the people I've been working with as well. So it's basically just using everything that's at hand that I can possibly use to achieve what I want to achieve, to try and arrive at a certain point. So definitely there would be some of that, that crossover.
It's interesting. I remember the movement director, the choreographer in theatre role, back in 1998. I had this very small part in the Abbey in the Colleen Bawn, and David Bulger at the time was the choreographer, and he was at the very beginning of that kind of relationship. But it was so funny because he was working with a group that was that really walking in time would be a kind of an achievement, you know. The shared output went from day one of rehearsals having us do this intricate mad stuff to day 7 of rehearsals going, listen lads, can you just just kind of walk? So is there, like, I'm more interested in that frustration of, I mean, obviously that was choreography rather than movement, but I mean, is there that, how do you find working in that environment with, say, non-dancers?
Well, it's I suppose it depends with each company or with each group. It changes. So I don't like to go into a room looking at limitations.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in getting the most that I can possibly get out of the people I'm working with, and I always think that we can give more than we think we can give. So, and that's probably the dancer side of me. The dancer side, we push. We're quite sadomasochistic in a way, you know? And so, but I think that it's important. The body is a fascinating thing. It can always give a little bit more than we think. Now, but at the same time, being very human and not making people feel awful or dangerous, but making them just go that little bit extra, because otherwise it just gets all very pedestrian.
Yeah.
You know, and I think when people do push, they find that they can excite themselves or get beyond themselves, and so I really enjoy working with actors, but I don't approach it like working with actors.
Yeah.
I approach it like, you know, how can we make the best possible thing for this particular moment using what we have, you know. So, you know, if you can't do the splits, we won't do the splits. So the splits has always worked so well. The audience.
I know if you're lying and telling me you can't do it and it's a lie, I'll try and find out if you're lying.
Yes, exactly.
I won't keep you much longer, but I'm interested in that's kind of hybrid spaces. I mean, you mentioned Alice in Wonderland, and this is Pop Baby, and obviously, you know, you've got an association with that company throughout the last decade or so, and working with that, you know, I think that their work is extraordinary. You know, it's really, I mean, Riot obviously is a case in point of that kind of space where, you know, it's back to that you mentioned for variety space, or back to that kind of review space. And I suppose looking back, and it's interesting you mentioned Fred Astaire and that type of thing. Is that still the type of work that gives you joy, whether it be on film or whether it be watching it? Like, is there a certain, is musical theatre or the likes of Fred Astaire your kind of touchstone for Philip?
Yes and no. So I was actually speaking to somebody about this the other day, and we were talking about dance on film, because, you know, particularly at this moment, there's been so much work put out there, and there was a possibility of people asking me to put my work online, and I was thinking about it, and I like work that's made to be seen how it should be seen. So so I love those musicals. I love those old films. They really go back to my roots. I love the scale of them. I love the color. I love that they're slightly camp. I love that they take me to a place of imagination that is beyond the reality of my existence, you know. And but I also love live performance. I think there's nothing more beautiful than it. So when I can bring a bit of that musical theatre into my own work and make it bigger and more beautiful and just 100% more than what I am, well, and so that includes kind of costume and set and, you know, as much as I can afford. Hydraulics.
Yeah,
No.
well,
And
I remember actually, speaking of that kind of old, you know, movie genre. I remember a very short piece you did for me when I was doing the Mansion House, and I still have vivid memories of you choreographed a piece to Dublin Can Be Heaven.
yeah.
But I had that mixture of, you know, old and contemporary, and it kind of we had Glitterball, but that sense of, and I suppose there's a kind of, you mentioned roots and kind of the authenticity. I think that's what I feel makes the dance so powerful and so vulnerable in both ways, is because for it to be good and for it to make a connection, or for it to be great and for it to make a connection, it needs the dancer present. To me, it needs that, and that's not easy to do.
No, it's not easy to do, but because it requires people turning up as well, and it requires people seeing it, and having a performer that gives them the confidence to watch it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And
to not cringe or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, does dance suffer by its, as an art form, saying particularly in Ireland, does it suffer by its alignment to theatre, or does that help it? Or is it seen as, you know what I mean, because it exists in similar spaces and kind of, you know, but if it was seen as something completely different, that it might.
That's a very interesting question, and I think yes, it does suffer sometimes. Now, I'm kind of in between those two worlds, but I am aware, absolutely, that often within the theatre-going community, their understanding of what great dance is often based around something that's more theatrical. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, as opposed to something that isn't theatrical, might not have fully. That people can think perhaps that something that is much more abstract didn't quite manage it as well as the other thing. And actually, no, that's not the case. It's something different. It's the body and movement. It is a different thing. So, which is very interesting, actually, because I work a lot in France, and lately, in the last couple of years, like all of my work has been shown in France. And I really noticed that there's a massive separation. So much so that in my last piece, I had some audience participation. So I wanted to I had this idea of the generation game and Bruce Forsyth. So I wanted to kind of get somebody up from the audience, and it was to dealing with memory. It was just a moment in the show, and I wanted to, so I had all of these things appearing on the wall, and I wanted somebody to get up and see them, just like in the conveyor belt, you know?
Yeah.
In the generation game. And cuddly toy, pink champagne, da-da-da. And so trying to get somebody, a contemporary dance audience in France, to participate in my show was, they did it and they really enjoyed it, but it was a real struggle. And actually, whereas here the audience were screaming, the whole audience were like, "Cuddly toy, child of Prague!" You know, they were told they loved the groundedness and the rootedness of being able to speak. Whereas in France they were like, "Oh, this isn't contemporary dance. We don't." Well, you know, that was interesting.
I think there is an exciting space, and I'll let you go after this, but I think there is it's a funny way, the kind of when people are forced, or when people work across different contexts, there's a really exciting space. They bring things back and to each other's spaces, and I think you're right. There's a very, particularly in your work, Philip, there's a very exciting space there for an Irish context, because I think there's certain audiences that are actually all audiences in my mind are open to anything, as long as they know the context within which they're kind of sitting there. I mean, you said your mother, when she understood what she was watching, and not by it being explained to her, but by just having the time to actually go again and again and again and again, that was like, oh yeah, okay, and being, as you said, brilliantly, being confident in her own opinion.
Yeah, yeah. So in the last show I did just a few months ago, I had a lot of people in from Fatima. There's a Fatima group. And I had these older men and women who came in to see the show, and afterwards I spoke with them. And there was a woman who wanted to say something when we were talking, and she said to me, you know, she said at the beginning of the piece, she said, I hadn't a clue what you guys were doing. But she said, but then I started to like you, and I thought, well, it's okay. And I thought that was really nice, that it was just like that she made a decision to be okay with it, and then could actually just enjoy it for what it was, you know.
Yeah.
And that's actually dance. That's being in the moment, being present and just enjoying it, you know.
Yeah. Philip, thanks so much for taking part in this. It's been an absolute joy to chat to you, as always. And I'm hoping you're getting some space to express yourself, you know, in our lockdown period. It must be very difficult as a dancer.
I've discovered my roof, actually. I don't have a garden, but I've got an extension, which is basically my bathroom. So I kind of go up there and take the sun. Who knows, I might have a little dance up there and terrify the neighbours. Then fall through the bloody roof. I hope not.
Listen, thanks a million. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks a million. Thanks, Mark.